The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with the usual mixture of arrogance and boredom that had characterized meetings for the past 3 centuries. Representatives from 47 different species sat in their designated sections, each group believing themselves superior to the others in some fundamental way. The Korthak delegation preened their metallic feathers while discussing their latest military conquests. The crystal-based Zephyrians hummed in harmonious frequencies about their technological superiority. The insectoid Vexi clicked their mandibles in satisfaction over their recent territorial expansions. At the center of it all sat Emperor Thaxmer, the self-proclaimed ruler of the known galaxy. His massive form dominated the throne that had been carved from a single piece of dark matter crystal, and his 6 eyes surveyed the assembly with the kind of casual contempt that came from never having been seriously challenged. The Drakmori had held the galactic throne for over 800 years, and Thaxmer saw no reason why that should ever change. "The quarterly territorial reports," announced Chancellor Vixtel, a spider-like creature whose voice echoed through the chamber's translation systems. "All sectors report successful expansion and resource acquisition. No significant resistance encountered in any quadrant." Thaxmer's mandibles clicked in approval. This was how the galaxy should function. The strong took what they wanted, and the weak submitted or were eliminated. It was natural law, and the Drakmori had proven themselves the strongest of all. "What of the restricted sectors?" asked General Krextos, the military commander whose scarred carapace told the story of 1,000 battles. "The quarantine zones established around primitive species." Chancellor Vixtel consulted his data pad, scrolling through lists of worlds deemed too insignificant for immediate conquest, but worth monitoring for potential threats. "All remain contained. The Rigelians continue their internal conflicts. The Centaurians are still developing basic space flight. The Proxima colonies show no signs of advancement beyond their current level." "And the Sol system?" The question came from Admiral Nexvara, whose reputation for thoroughness was matched only by her cruelty. "Sol remains as isolated as ever," Vixtel replied with what passed for a chuckle among his species. "The species there has barely managed to establish a few colonies within their own system. They call themselves humans, and their technology remains laughably primitive. Our last probe indicated they're still using chemical propulsion and basic nuclear fission. No faster-than-light capability detected." Emperor Thaxmer leaned back in his throne, amused. "Humans, such an aggressive-sounding name for such a pathetic species. How long have we been monitoring them?" "Approximately 200 Earth years, Your Magnificence. They've shown marginal advancement during that time, but nothing approaching a threat level. Our xenobiologists classify them as barely sentient, with primitive social structures and limited technological adaptation." The assembled council erupted in the various sounds their species made to express amusement. To them, the idea of a species so backward was genuinely funny. They had encountered thousands of species during their expansion across the galaxy, and very few had proven worth even enslaving. Most were simply eliminated to make room for superior races. "Perhaps we should send a small fleet to collect specimens," suggested Science Minister Velkoth. "The humans might prove useful for biological experiments. Their physiology appears to have some interesting quirks that could benefit our research into genetic enhancement." "Or we could simply harvest their world," added Economic Advisor Zellman. "The planet appears to have substantial water reserves and a diverse ecosystem. We could terraform it properly and establish a resort world for the upper castes." Thaxmer was considering these options when the chamber's emergency alert system began blaring. The sound was unlike anything heard in the council chamber for over 3 centuries, and it took several moments for the assembled representatives to understand what was happening. "Your Magnificence," came the panicked voice of Fleet Admiral Kexther through the communication system. "We have an unidentified vessel approaching the throne world. It appeared without warning directly outside our defensive perimeter." The Emperor's eyes narrowed. No ship should have been able to approach Drakmoris Prime without being detected long before reaching the outer system. The planet was protected by the most advanced sensor networks in the galaxy, and the defensive fleet stationed there was larger than most species' entire military forces. "What kind of vessel?" Thaxmer demanded, his voice carrying the edge that had made entire worlds surrender without a fight. "Unknown configuration, Your Magnificence. It doesn't match any design in our databases. The ship appears to be approximately 2 kilometers in length, with a hull composition we cannot identify. Our sensors are having difficulty penetrating whatever material it's constructed from. Chancellor Vixtel's 8 legs clicked nervously against the floor. What is their stated purpose? Have they responded to our communication attempts? Negative, Your Magnificence. They have not responded to any hails. The vessel is simply maintaining position approximately 1 million kilometers from our outermost defensive platforms. It appears to be scanning our installations. The idea that someone was scanning Drakmori military installations without permission sent a wave of anger through the assembled council. Several representatives began demanding immediate military action, their various forms of indignation creating a cacophony of alien sounds. Emperor Thaxmer raised one massive hand, and silence fell instantly. How long until our defense fleet can intercept? Battle Group 7 is already moving to intercept, Your Magnificence. Admiral Vexkari reports they will be in firing position within 30 minutes. Excellent, put the encounter on the main display. I want to see what manner of fools dare to approach the Drakmori throne world uninvited. The chamber's massive holographic display flickered to life, showing the space around Drakmoris Prime. The planet itself dominated the center of the image, a dark world whose surface was covered in the sprawling cities of the galaxy's ruling species. Surrounding it in carefully arranged orbital patterns were the defensive platforms, weapons satellites, and patrol vessels that made the system impregnable. At the edge of the display, barely visible as a small blip, was the unknown vessel. Magnify, ordered Thaxmer. The image zoomed in, and the assembled council got their first clear look at the intruding ship. It was unlike anything in their databases. The hull appeared to be a dark gray material that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The ship's design was angular and aggressive, with weapon ports that looked distinctly foreign. Strange markings covered the hull, symbols that meant nothing to any species represented in the chamber. Analysis, demanded the Emperor. Science Minister Velkoth manipulated his own display, running the ship's image through every database available to the Drakmori. No match found in any known ship classification. The hull appears to be some form of advanced composite material, possibly incorporating elements we haven't encountered before. The energy readings are unusual as well. The power signature is enormous, far larger than would be expected for a vessel of that size. Could it be from beyond the galactic rim? Asked Admiral Nexvara. Perhaps an explorer from one of the distant spiral arms. Possible, but unlikely, replied Velkoth. The design philosophy appears to be completely alien to anything we've documented. The weapon placements suggest a species with a very different approach to space combat. General Krextos leaned forward in his seat, his predator's instincts engaged. I don't like the positioning. The vessel is maintaining perfect distance from our defense platforms, just outside optimal firing range, but close enough to scan everything. This suggests detailed knowledge of our capabilities. How is that possible? Chancellor Vixtel's voice carried a note of concern that was unusual for the typically calm administrator. Unknown, admitted the general, but whoever is commanding that vessel knows exactly what they're doing. The display updated as Battle Group 7 came into view. 36 Drakmori warships, each one capable of destroying entire fleets of lesser species, moved in perfect formation toward the unknown vessel. The sight should have been reassuring, but something about the stranger's complete lack of reaction was unsettling. Admiral Vexkari reports ready to engage, announced Fleet Admiral Kexther through the communication system, requesting permission to open fire. Emperor Thaxmer studied the display for a long moment. The smart thing would be to destroy the unknown vessel immediately, before it could become a threat. But something about the situation intrigued him. In 800 years of Drakmori dominance, no species had ever approached the throne world so boldly. The ship's commander was either completely insane or possessed of capabilities that made them confident enough to challenge the galaxy's most powerful military force. Open a channel to the unknown vessel, he ordered. Let's see what manner of creature is foolish enough to approach my world uninvited. The communication system activated, broadcasting on all frequencies in every known language throughout the galaxy. When Thaxmer spoke, his words were translated into thousands of different forms, ensuring that any sentient being would understand his message. Unknown vessel, you have entered Drakmori space without authorization. I am Emperor Thaxmer, ruler of this galaxy and all within it. State your purpose immediately or be destroyed. The response came almost instantly, but not in any language the translation systems recognized. The voice was organic, clearly from a biological being rather than an artificial intelligence, but the words were completely alien. Worse, there was something in the tone that made every predator species in the chamber feel suddenly uncomfortable. Translation systems are unable to process the language, reported Communication Officer Zixtel. The linguistic structure appears to be completely outside our database parameters. Run a deeper analysis, ordered Chancellor Vixtel. Cross-reference with every xenolinguistic database in the archives. The wait stretched for several minutes as the most advanced translation computers in the galaxy struggled with the alien language. When the results finally appeared, they sent a chill through the assembled council. Partial translation achieved, announced Zixtel, his voice trembling slightly. The linguistic structure appears to be from the Sol system, Your Magnificence. The language is human. The chamber fell silent. Every representative stared at the display, trying to process what they had just heard. The possibility seemed impossible. According to their most recent intelligence, humans barely had the technology to travel between planets in their own system. They certainly didn't possess faster-than-light travel, and they definitely couldn't construct vessels capable of challenging Drakmori military forces. That's impossible, Science Minister Velkoth declared. Our monitoring stations have been watching the Sol system continuously. There's no way the humans could have developed this level of technology without our detection. Unless, General Crexto said slowly, our monitoring stations haven't been watching the real human civilization. The implications of that statement hung in the air like a toxic cloud. If the humans had somehow been hiding their true capabilities, if the primitive colonies and basic technology were merely a deception, then the Drakmori intelligence network had failed in a way that could prove catastrophic. What was the translation? Emperor Thaxmer demanded. Communication Officer Zixtel consulted his display, his multiple eyes blinking in patterns that indicated extreme stress. The message was, "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the UNS Defiance. I'm here to discuss the terms of your surrender." The silence that followed was absolute. In 800 years of conquest, no species had ever suggested that the Drakmori Empire should surrender to them. The very concept was so foreign that most of the assembled representatives couldn't fully process what they had heard. Emperor Thaxmer was the first to recover, and his response was a roar of rage that shook the crystal walls of the chamber. Surrender? These pathetic humans dare suggest that the rulers of the galaxy should surrender to them. On the display, the human ship maintained its position, apparently unconcerned by the battle group that now surrounded it. The vessel made no aggressive moves, but neither did it show any signs of retreat. If anything, the ship's posture suggested complete confidence in its ability to handle whatever the Drakmori might throw at it. Admiral Vexkari reports targeting systems locked on the alien vessel, announced Fleet Admiral Kexther. All ships ready to fire on your command. Thaxmer stood from his throne, his massive form radiating fury. Destroy them. Show these upstart humans what happens when someone challenges the Drakmori Empire. The command was relayed instantly, and 36 of the most powerful warships in the galaxy opened fire simultaneously. The space around the human vessel erupted in a display of destructive energy that would have vaporized a moon. Plasma cannons, quantum disruptors, and dark matter torpedoes converged on the target with enough force to crack a planet. When the energy dissipated and the sensors cleared, the human ship was still there. Not only was it undamaged, but its hull didn't show even the slightest scorch mark. Whatever material the vessel was constructed from had absorbed or deflected energy weapons that should have been irresistible. Worse, the ship's power readings were actually higher than before, as if the attack had somehow strengthened it. "How is that possible?" whispered Science Minister Velkoth. Before anyone could answer, the human ship moved. It didn't accelerate gradually like every other spacecraft the Drakmori had encountered. Instead, it simply appeared in a different location, having crossed several thousand kilometers in an instant. Now it was positioned directly between two of the attacking warships, close enough that its hull would have been scraping their shields if they had been using conventional technology. Admiral Vexkari reports the alien vessel has somehow penetrated the formation, Fleet Admiral Kexther announced, his voice tight with disbelief. "Our sensors didn't detect any movement. It simply appeared in a new position." The human ship's response to the attack came in the form of a single beam of coherent energy that lasted less than a second. The beam struck the Drakmori heavy cruiser Retribution amidships, and the massive warship simply ceased to exist. There was no explosion, no debris field, no radiation signature. The ship was there one moment and gone the next, as if it had never existed at all. The council chamber erupted in chaos as representatives from 47 different species began shouting in their native languages. Nothing in their collective experience had prepared them for what they were witnessing. The Drakmori Empire's most powerful weapons had proven useless against human technology, while a single human weapon had erased one of their largest warships without apparent effort. Emperor Thaxmer stared at the display in stunned silence. The human vessel had returned to its original position, once again maintaining perfect distance from the remaining warships. It was as if the brief demonstration of power had been carefully calculated to make a point without unnecessary destruction. "Admiral Vexkari requests immediate reinforcement," reported Fleet Admiral Kexther. "The remaining ships are withdrawing to defensive positions." "Belay that order," Thaxmer commanded, his voice deadly quiet. "Have them maintain position but do not engage unless fired upon." The Emperor's tactical mind was racing. Everything about the encounter suggested that the humans were operating from a position of overwhelming technological superiority. The single human ship could apparently move through space in ways that defied physics, ignore the most powerful weapons in the Drakmori arsenal, and eliminate their warships with casual ease. But if that were true, why hadn't they simply destroyed the entire battle group? Why the demonstration instead of total annihilation? The answer suggested that the humans were interested in communication rather than conquest, which raised even more disturbing questions about their motivations and capabilities. "Re-establish communication with the human vessel," he ordered. This time, when the human captain's voice came through the translation system, the computers were ready for the linguistic patterns. The voice that emerged was distinctly female, calm and professional in a way that suggested complete confidence. "Emperor Thaxmer, I assume you have questions about what just occurred. I'm prepared to answer them, but first you need to understand something important. What you've been monitoring in the Sol system for the past 200 years isn't the human civilization. It's a collection of research stations and observation posts we maintain to study primitive space technology." The implications hit the assembled council like a physical blow. If the humans had been watching the Watchers, if they had been deliberately feeding false information to Drakmori intelligence, then everything the Empire thought it knew about human capabilities was wrong. "Our actual civilization," Captain Chen continued, "has been spacefaring for over 1,000 Earth years. We've been exploring this galaxy much longer than the Drakmori have been conquering it. We know about every species you've enslaved or eliminated. We've been watching your expansion with growing concern." Chancellor Vixtel's 8 legs were trembling as he accessed his data systems. "Your Magnificence, if this is true, then our entire strategic assessment has been compromised. We've been planning galactic expansion based on incomplete information. The question now," Captain Chen's voice continued, "is whether the Drakmori Empire is capable of coexisting with other sentient species, or whether you represent a threat that must be eliminated for the safety of the galaxy." Emperor Thaxmer felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries: uncertainty. The humans were speaking from a position of strength, demonstrating capabilities that made Drakmori military supremacy seem suddenly fragile. But they were also offering dialogue instead of demanding immediate submission, which suggested a level of sophistication that the Empire's usual tactics weren't designed to handle. The truth was becoming clear with each passing moment. The Drakmori Empire, for all its power and conquest, might have just encountered a civilization that could end their reign without breaking stride. The only question was whether they would be wise enough to recognize that fact before it was too late. Emperor Thaxmer's throne chamber had never felt as confining as it did in that moment. The massive space that had once symbolized the absolute power of the Drakmori Empire now seemed like little more than an elaborate cage. Outside, a single human warship waited with the patience of a predator that knew its prey had nowhere to run. "Establish a secure channel," the Emperor commanded, his voice carefully controlled despite the chaos raging in his mind. I will speak with this human captain directly. The communication systems hummed to life, creating a direct link between the throne chamber and the UNS Defiance. When Captain Sarah Chen's image appeared on the main display, the assembled council got their first look at a human being. The sight was both disappointing and terrifying in ways none of them had expected. She was small by galactic standards, barely 2 meters tall and lacking any visible natural weapons. Her skin was a light brown color that seemed to shift subtly under the ship's lighting, and her hair was black and pulled back in a practical style. But her eyes were what caught everyone's attention. They held an intelligence that was immediately recognizable and a confidence that suggested she had never encountered a problem she couldn't solve. "Your Imperial Magnificence," she said with what appeared to be genuine courtesy. "Thank you for agreeing to speak with me directly. I'm Captain Sarah Chen, commanding officer of the UNS Defiance and diplomatic representative of the United Human Systems." The fact that she spoke flawless Drachmori, without any need for translation systems, sent another wave of unease through the assembled council. Learning the primary language of another species required years of study and linguistic analysis. The implications of humans having achieved that level of understanding were staggering. "You claim to represent human civilization," Thaxmer began, choosing his words carefully. "Yet our intelligence indicates that your species has barely achieved interplanetary travel within your own system." Captain Chen's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes suggested amusement. "Your intelligence is observing exactly what we want it to observe, Your Magnificence. The installations in the Sol system serve multiple purposes, but representing our technological capabilities isn't one of them." "Then what are they for?" demanded General Crextos, his warrior instincts screaming that they were facing a threat unlike any they had encountered before. "Primarily research and development," Chen replied. "We find it useful to maintain facilities where we can experiment with primitive technology without attracting attention. Some of our greatest innovations have come from deliberately limiting ourselves to basic materials and simple energy sources." Science Minister Velkoth leaned forward, his analytical mind trying to process the implications. "You deliberately handicapped yourselves to stimulate innovation. Necessity is the mother of invention, as we say. When you have access to unlimited resources and advanced technology, it's easy to become complacent. When you have to solve problems with sticks and rocks, you develop creative thinking that serves you well when you return to advanced systems." The concept was alien to every species in the chamber. The galactic approach to technological development had always been to build upon existing knowledge, expanding capabilities through the acquisition of new resources and the conquest of other civilizations. The idea of deliberately limiting yourself to encourage innovation was completely outside their experience. "Your ship," Admiral Nexvara said, studying the vessel's image on her personal display. "The technology you've demonstrated, how far beyond our current capabilities are you?" Captain Chen was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke, her tone carried a weight that made everyone in the chamber listen carefully. "Admiral, imagine that your people had never discovered fire. Now imagine trying to explain nuclear fusion to them. The gap between our technologies isn't just about advancement. It's about fundamental understanding of how the universe works." Emperor Thaxmer felt the blood freeze in his veins. He had been hoping that human technology was simply more advanced, representing an evolutionary step beyond current Drachmori capabilities. But what Chen was describing suggested something far more dangerous, a completely different approach to science and engineering that had led them down paths the Empire had never even conceived of. "The vessel that destroyed our warship," he said slowly. "What type of weapon was that?" "We call it a quantum dissolution beam," Chen replied matter-of-factly. "It disrupts the quantum bonds that hold matter together at the subatomic level. The target doesn't explode or burn. It simply stops existing in this reality." The casual way she described technology that could erase matter from existence sent chills through every being in the chamber. Drachmori plasma cannons could destroy ships and melt planets, but they still operated within understood principles of physics. What the humans had demonstrated was something beyond conventional science. "And your defensive systems?" asked Science Minister Velkoth, his voice barely above a whisper. "The hull absorbs energy and converts it into usable power for our systems. The more you shoot at us, the stronger we become. As for our movement capabilities, we don't actually move through space in the conventional sense. We adjust our position in the quantum field that underlies reality. Chancellor Vixtel's 8 legs were clicking against the floor in patterns that indicated extreme stress. Captain Chen, with respect, what you're describing should be impossible according to every scientific principle we understand. That's the point, Chancellor. Your scientific principles are based on observations of a limited portion of reality. Humans have been exploring beyond those limitations for centuries. We've discovered that what most species consider immutable laws of physics are really just suggestions. The throne chamber fell silent as the assembled representatives tried to process what they were hearing. The Drakmori Empire had built its power on the assumption that they possessed the most advanced technology in the galaxy. They had conquered countless species by leveraging their superior weapons and defensive systems. But if humans could manipulate the fundamental forces of reality itself, then every advantage the Empire had built meant nothing. Emperor Thaxmer realized that he was facing the most critical decision in Drakmori history. The wrong choice here could mean the end of everything his species had built over 8 centuries of conquest. But the right choice might offer opportunities that he couldn't yet fully comprehend. Captain Chen, he said finally, you mentioned discussing terms of surrender. Explain what you mean. The Drakmori Empire has spent centuries conquering other species and stripping worlds of their resources. In the process, you've eliminated entire civilizations and reduced countless species to slavery. From a human perspective, this represents a clear and present danger to galactic stability. And your solution is the destruction of my empire. Thaxmer's voice carried a note of challenge, but also curiosity about how these humans thought. Destruction is one option, Chen admitted. We could eliminate every Drakmori installation in the galaxy within a matter of days, but we prefer more elegant solutions when possible. Such as transformation. The Drakmori Empire as it currently exists must end. But the Drakmori people don't have to end with it. You have qualities that could make you valuable contributors to a galactic civilization based on cooperation rather than conquest. General Krextos bristled at the implication. You suggest that we abandon our way of life, that we submit to human authority. Captain Chen shook her head. General, I'm not suggesting you submit to human authority. I'm suggesting you join a galactic community where strength is measured by contribution rather than conquest, where species work together to explore the universe rather than fighting over pieces of it. And if we refuse? Thaxmer asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Then we'll do what's necessary to protect the other species in this galaxy from further Drakmori expansion. The choice is yours, your magnificence, but the current situation is unsustainable. The Emperor leaned back in his throne, his mind racing through possibilities. Everything he had been taught about strength and power was being challenged by a species he had dismissed as insignificant mere hours ago. But the demonstration of human capabilities had been undeniable, and their apparent willingness to offer alternatives to destruction suggested a sophistication that the Empire had never encountered. What would this transformation entail? He asked finally. The immediate cessation of all military expansion and the release of all enslaved species. The Drakmori military would be restructured to focus on defense rather than conquest. Your people would be integrated into the galactic community as equals rather than rulers. Admiral Nexvara's voice was sharp with indignation. You're asking us to dismantle everything we've built, to abandon our position as the dominant species in the galaxy. I'm asking you to evolve beyond the need for dominance, Chen replied. Admiral, your people have remarkable qualities. You're natural strategists, excellent engineers, and capable of incredible loyalty and sacrifice. Those qualities could serve the galaxy well if they were directed toward construction rather than destruction. The compliments felt strange coming from someone who had just demonstrated the ability to destroy the Empire without effort. But there was something in Chen's tone that suggested she genuinely believed what she was saying about Drakmori potential. And humans would lead this galactic community, Chancellor Vixtel asked. Humans would be part of it, along with every other species capable of peaceful coexistence. Leadership would be based on expertise and contribution, not military strength or technological superiority. Emperor Thaxmer studied the human captain's image, trying to understand the mind behind those confident eyes. Everything about this encounter challenged his fundamental assumptions about power and civilization. The Drakmori way had always been simple. The strong conquered the weak, and the weak served or were eliminated. But these humans were proposing something entirely different. "How many other species have you made this offer to?" he asked. "You're the first, Your Magnificence. We've been watching and waiting for the right opportunity to introduce ourselves to galactic civilization. The Drakmori Empire's expansion has reached a point where intervention became necessary. And if other species refuse your offer of cooperation..." Captain Chen's expression grew subtly harder. "Then they'll discover that humans can be as ruthless as necessary when protecting innocent lives. We prefer cooperation, but we're fully prepared for conflict." The threat was delivered so calmly that it took a moment for its full implications to sink in. These humans weren't just technologically superior. They were prepared to use that superiority to reshape galactic civilization according to their vision of how things should be. Science Minister Velkoth raised a trembling appendage. "Captain Chen, may I ask how long your people have been observing galactic civilization?" "We've been aware of galactic politics for approximately 600 Earth years, Minister. We've been actively monitoring the situation for the past 300. 300 years, Velkoth whispered. "You've been watching our expansion from the beginning." "We've been watching every expansion, Minister. Every conquest, every genocide, every enslaved world. We have detailed records of everything the Drakmori Empire has done since you first left your home system." The implications of that statement hung in the air like an executioner's blade. The humans hadn't just observed Drakmori military actions. They had compiled evidence of 8 centuries of conquest and subjugation. In human hands, that information could serve as a comprehensive indictment of everything the Empire had done. Emperor Thaxmer realized that he was no longer just facing a military threat. He was facing a judgment by a species that had watched his people's actions with growing disapproval for centuries. The question was whether the Drakmori Empire could convince these human judges that they were capable of redemption. "Captain Chen," he said slowly, "if we were to consider your proposal, what guarantees would we have that humans would honor their agreements? What prevents you from simply eliminating us once we've dismantled our military capabilities?" "An excellent question, Your Magnificence. The answer is that elimination was never our goal. We want partners in exploring the universe, not servants or enemies. A reformed Drakmori civilization could contribute enormously to that exploration." "But you're asking us to take your word for that." "No, I'm asking you to make a choice based on evidence. Look at what we've done here today. We could have destroyed your entire fleet and bombarded this world from orbit. Instead, we eliminated one ship as a demonstration and open dialogue. Our actions speak to our intentions." General Krextos leaned forward, his predator's mind focused on tactical realities. "Captain, you speak of galactic cooperation, but someone still has to make decisions. Someone still has to have authority." "Authority comes from expertise and consensus, General. When we need military advice, we'll turn to those with military experience. When we need scientific innovation, we'll turn to researchers and inventors. When we need diplomatic solutions, we'll turn to those who understand different species and cultures. And when those experts disagree, then we find compromise or we find better experts. The goal isn't to create a perfect system, General. It's to create a system that works better than conquest and subjugation." The debate continued for another hour, with various council members raising objections and concerns, while Captain Chen responded with calm patience. But underlying every exchange was the fundamental reality that had been established in the first moments of the encounter. Humans possessed capabilities that made resistance futile and negotiation the only rational option. Finally, Emperor Thaxmer raised his hand for silence. The chamber fell quiet, and every being present understood that the next words spoken would determine the fate of the Drakmori Empire and possibly the entire galaxy. "Captain Chen," the Emperor said, his voice carrying the weight of 8 centuries of conquest, "your proposal requires careful consideration. I cannot make such a decision without consulting my advisors and evaluating all options." "Of course, Your Magnificence. How much time do you need?" 72 hours. "Agreed. The Defiance will maintain position during that time." but understand that any attempt to contact other Drakmori fleets or prepare military action will be considered a rejection of our offer. Understood. The communication link closed, leaving the throne chamber in stunned silence. Emperor Thaxmer looked around at his advisors, seeing his own uncertainty reflected in their alien features. For the first time in centuries, the Drakmori Empire faced a decision that couldn't be solved through superior firepower. The question now was whether they could evolve quickly enough to survive what came next. The emergency session convened in the most secure chamber beneath the Imperial Palace, a room carved from solid stone and shielded against every known form of surveillance. For the first time in Drakmori history, the Empire's leadership gathered not to plan conquest, but to consider surrender. Emperor Thaxmer sat at the head of the ancient council table, his 6 eyes studying each advisor in turn. These beings had helped him rule the galaxy for 3 centuries, but nothing in their collective experience had prepared them for the current crisis. The weight of decision pressed down on everyone present like a physical force. "Report," the Emperor commanded. General Krextos was the first to speak, his scarred carapace reflecting the chamber's dim lighting. "All attempts to contact other fleet elements have been blocked. The human ship is jamming our communications across the entire system. Whatever they're using makes our best encryption look like primitive radio." "What about our deep space monitoring stations?" asked Admiral Nexvara. "Silent," Krextos replied grimly. "Either they're being jammed as well, or they've been eliminated. We have no way of knowing if word of this encounter has reached any other Drakmori installations." Science Minister Velkoth manipulated his personal display, showing tactical projections of the current situation. "I've run every analysis possible of the human vessel. The technology they're demonstrating shouldn't exist according to our understanding of physics. The energy requirements alone for their demonstrated capabilities should require a power source the size of a small star." "Could they be using artificial gravity manipulation?" suggested economic advisor Zellman. "Beyond anything we've theorized," Velkoth replied. "They're not just manipulating gravity, they appear to be manipulating the fundamental structure of spacetime itself. The implications are staggering." Chancellor Vixtel's 8 legs clicked nervously against the stone floor. "The political ramifications are equally concerning, Your Magnificence. If we capitulate to human demands, every subject species in the Empire will see it as weakness. We could face rebellions across hundreds of worlds." "And if we don't capitulate," Admiral Nexvara pointed out, "we might not have an empire left to worry about rebellions in." The brutal honesty of that assessment hung in the air like a death sentence. Everyone in the room understood that they were discussing the possible end of everything the Drakmori had built over 8 centuries of expansion. Emperor Thaxmer leaned back in his chair, his mind working through possibilities and probabilities. "What do we know about human psychology? Are there any precedents for dealing with species like this?" "Nothing in our databases," admitted Intelligence Director Kixmol. "But I've been analyzing their approach to this encounter. They could have simply destroyed us without warning. Instead, they chose to demonstrate their capabilities and offer alternatives. This suggests they're not motivated purely by aggression. Or it suggests they're playing a more sophisticated game than we understand," General Krextos countered. "Perhaps they want something from us that they couldn't get from our corpses." Science Minister Velkoth raised a tentative appendage. "Your Magnificence, I've been analyzing the linguistic patterns in Captain Chen's communications. Human language structure suggests a species with highly developed social cooperation mechanisms. Their vocabulary includes concepts for collaborative decision-making that don't exist in most galactic languages." "What does that mean in practical terms?" the Emperor asked. "It means they might actually believe what they're saying about cooperation and partnership. Their language evolved to support complex social structures based on mutual benefit rather than dominance hierarchies." The implication was disturbing for species that had built their entire civilization on the principle that might makes right. If humans had evolved different social instincts, then their approach to galactic politics might be fundamentally incompatible with Drakmori understanding. "What about their claims regarding other species?" asked Chancellor Vixtel. "The suggestion that they've been monitoring galactic civilization for centuries." Intelligence Director Kixmol activated his own display, showing a timeline of Drakmori expansion. I've been cross-referencing our expansion history with reported anomalies and unexplained phenomena. There are patterns that could support their claims. What kind of patterns? Demanded Admiral Nexvara. Sensor ghosts in systems we've conquered. Unexplained energy signatures that our science teams couldn't identify. Survey probes that disappeared without explanation. If humans were conducting covert observation operations, these anomalies would fit the profile. Emperor Thaxmer felt a chill run through his massive frame. The possibility that human observers had been present during Drakmori military operations was deeply unsettling. It meant that every tactical advantage, every strategic innovation, every military secret the Empire possessed was potentially known to human intelligence. "How compromised are we?" he asked quietly. "Potentially completely," Kixmal admitted. "If they've been watching us for 3 centuries, they know everything about our military capabilities, our political structure, and our expansion strategies." The silence that followed was heavy with implications. Fighting an enemy who knew all your capabilities while you knew nothing about theirs wasn't warfare. It was suicide. General Krextos leaned forward, his predator instincts still engaged despite the overwhelming odds. "Your Magnificence, there's something else to consider. If these humans are as powerful as they claim, why reveal themselves now? What changed?" It was an excellent question, and one that had been nagging at Thaxmer since the encounter began. Species with overwhelming technological advantages didn't usually announce themselves unless they had specific goals that required direct communication. "Perhaps," suggested economic advisor Zellman, "they've been waiting for us to reach a certain level of expansion. Maybe our current territory represents some kind of threshold." "Or maybe," Admiral Nexvara said grimly, "they've decided we've become enough of a threat to require direct intervention." Science Minister Velkoth manipulated his display again, showing galactic maps of Drakmori expansion over time. "Actually, that's a disturbing possibility. Our expansion rate has been accelerating over the past century. If humans have been monitoring other species as well, they might have concluded that we represent an existential threat to galactic biodiversity." The idea that the Drakmori Empire might be viewed as a galactic cancer requiring surgical removal was not pleasant to contemplate. But it would explain why humans had chosen this moment to reveal themselves, and why they were demanding immediate changes to imperial policy. "What about their offer of cooperation?" asked Chancellor Vixtel. "Could it be genuine?" "Unknown," admitted Intelligence Director Kixmal. "We have no baseline for human psychology or motivation. They could be genuinely interested in partnership, or this could be an elaborate deception designed to achieve some goal we haven't identified." Emperor Thaxmer stood and began packing, his massive form moving with the restless energy of a caged predator. Every instinct he possessed screamed at him to fight, to resist this challenge to Drakmori supremacy with every weapon at his disposal. But his intellect recognized that such a response would likely mean the extinction of his species. "If we accept their terms," he said slowly, "what happens to our people, to our way of life?" "Change," replied Chancellor Vixtel simply. "Fundamental, irreversible change. The Drakmori Empire as we know it would cease to exist." "And if we refuse?" General Krextos's scarred features showed no emotion as he answered. "Based on what we've observed of their capabilities, refusal would likely result in the systematic elimination of all Drakmori military assets, followed by direct action against our population centers." The brutal assessment was delivered without drama or embellishment. It was simply a tactical reality based on observed capabilities and stated intentions. "How long would resistance last?" the Emperor asked. "Hours, possibly days if we're fortunate," Krextos replied. "Their demonstrated technology makes our defensive capabilities irrelevant. They could probably eliminate our entire fleet without taking any casualties." The throne chamber fell silent as everyone contemplated the magnitude of their situation. The Drakmori Empire, which had seemed invincible just days ago, now faced extinction at the hands of a species they had dismissed as primitives. Admiral Nexvara broke the silence with a question that cut to the heart of their dilemma. "Your Magnificence, is survival as a subordinate species preferable to extinction as a dominant one?" It was the question that every conquered species had faced when confronted with Drakmori demands for submission. Now, the Empire's leadership found themselves on the other side of that equation, and the irony wasn't lost on anyone present. "There's another factor to consider," Science Minister Velkoth said quietly. "If humans possess the technology they've demonstrated, cooperation with them could provide access to knowledge and capabilities beyond our current imagination." "You're suggesting we could benefit from this arrangement?" asked Economic Advisor Zellman. "I'm suggesting that human technology appears to be based on scientific principles we don't understand. Access to that knowledge could advance Drakmori capabilities in ways that would make our current expansion seem primitive by comparison. The possibility of gaining access to technology that could manipulate reality itself was tantalizing, but it would require abandoning everything the Drakmori had believed about strength and superiority." Emperor Thaxmer stopped packing and returned to his seat. The weight of decision pressed down on him with crushing force. 8 centuries of conquest and expansion had led to this moment, where the survival of his species depended on a choice between pride and pragmatism. "What are the chances that other species will accept human authority?" he asked. "Unknown," admitted Intelligence Director Kixmal. "But if humans can demonstrate the same level of technological superiority to other species, resistance would likely be minimal. And if we're the first to cooperate, we might have advantages in whatever system they establish," suggested Chancellor Vixtel. "Early cooperation could be viewed favorably when they assign roles and responsibilities." It was a calculated political assessment, the kind of thinking that had served the Empire well during centuries of expansion. But applying it to a situation where they held no leverage felt strange and uncomfortable. General Krextos leaned forward, his warrior instincts still struggling with the implications of what they were discussing. "Your Magnificence, there's one more possibility we haven't considered." "What's that, General?" "What if this is a test? What if the humans are evaluating our response to determine whether we're worthy of partnership or whether we need to be eliminated?" The suggestion sent a chill through everyone present. If their decision-making process was being monitored and evaluated, then every word spoken in this chamber could influence the fate of the Drakmori species. Emperor Thaxmer looked around the table at his advisors, seeing uncertainty and fear reflected in their alien features. These beings had helped him conquer half the galaxy, but now they faced a challenge that couldn't be overcome through superior firepower or tactical brilliance. The Emperor realized that he was facing the most important decision in Drakmori history. The choice he made in the next few hours would determine whether his species survived to see another century or whether the Empire died with him in this room. But beneath his fear and uncertainty, Thaxmer felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries: curiosity. What would galactic civilization look like under human guidance? What technologies and knowledge might become available to species that chose cooperation over conquest? What possibilities might exist beyond the limited horizons of the Drakmori Way? For the first time since the encounter began, the Emperor allowed himself to consider that perhaps change didn't have to mean defeat. Perhaps it could mean transformation into something greater than what they had been. The question was whether he had the courage to find out. 47 hours into their deliberations, Emperor Thaxmer made a decision that would have seemed impossible just days before. He activated a direct communication channel to the UNS Defiance, knowing that his next words would either save or doom the Drakmori Empire. Captain Sarah Chen appeared on the display exactly as she had before, calm and composed despite the historic nature of the moment. Her human features showed no signs of impatience or concern, suggesting either remarkable self-control or complete confidence in the outcome of their negotiations. "Captain Chen," Thaxmer began, his voice carrying the weight of 8 centuries of conquest, "the Drakmori Empire accepts your terms." The words felt strange on his tongue, but as he spoke them, the Emperor realized that they also felt right in a way he couldn't fully explain. The crushing pressure of decision that had weighed on him for 2 days began to lift, replaced by something that might have been relief. "I'm pleased to hear that, Your Magnificence," Chen replied. "But I need to be clear about what acceptance means. This isn't a conditional surrender or a temporary ceasefire. This is a fundamental transformation of how the Drakmori Empire operates." "I understand," Thaxmer said, "but I have questions about the implementation process." "Of course, what would you like to know?" the enslaved species under our control. How do we release entire populations that have been integrated into our economic and social systems without causing massive instability? It was a practical question that demonstrated the complexity of dismantling an empire built on conquest and subjugation. The Drakmori had enslaved hundreds of species across thousands of worlds, creating economic dependencies that couldn't be simply erased overnight. Gradually and systematically, Chen replied. We'll provide technical and logistical support for the transition process. Species that want complete independence will get it. Others might prefer to maintain economic relationships with the Drakmori under different terms. And our military forces will be restructured to focus on defense and exploration rather than conquest. Many of your officers and soldiers have skills that would be valuable in a cooperative galactic civilization. General Krextos leaned forward, his scarred features showing skepticism. Captain, with respect, you're asking us to abandon everything we've built. What guarantees do we have that this new arrangement will actually work? None, Chen admitted readily. General, I can't guarantee that galactic cooperation will work perfectly any more than you could guarantee that conquest and subjugation would last forever. What I can tell you is that we've observed the results of your current approach, and they're unsustainable. The honest assessment was more reassuring than any promise would have been. Chen wasn't trying to deceive them about the challenges ahead, which suggested that her other claims might also be truthful. What about species that refuse to cooperate with this new arrangement? Asked Admiral Nexvara. Each species will be evaluated based on their actions and intentions, Chen replied. Those that choose peaceful coexistence will be welcomed into the galactic community. Those that pose threats to other species will be dealt with accordingly. The implications were clear without being explicitly threatening. Humans were prepared to use force when necessary, but they preferred alternatives when possible. Emperor Thaxmer studied the human captain's image, trying to understand the mind behind those confident eyes. Captain Chen, why are humans willing to take responsibility for galactic civilization? What do your people gain from this arrangement? Knowledge, your magnificence. The universe is vast and full of mysteries that no single species can solve alone. Every civilization we've encountered has unique perspectives and capabilities that could contribute to our understanding. The Drakmori, for example, have developed military technologies and strategic thinking that could be invaluable for defending against external threats. External threats. Chen's expression grew more serious. Your magnificence, the galaxy is larger than what any of us have explored. There are forces out there that make current political conflicts seem insignificant by comparison. Cooperation isn't just preferable to conquest, it's necessary for survival. The suggestion that there were threats beyond the galaxy's current borders was sobering. The Drakmori had always assumed that their expansion would eventually encompass all habitable worlds. But if humans were correct, there might be challenges ahead that required the combined efforts of multiple species. Science Minister Velkoth raised a trembling appendage. Captain, may I ask about human scientific capabilities? The technology you've demonstrated appears to violate several fundamental laws of physics. Minister, what you call fundamental laws are really just descriptions of observed phenomena within a limited range of conditions. Human science has learned to work with the underlying structures that create those phenomena. Could you be more specific? Chen paused for a moment, as if considering how much to reveal. We've learned to manipulate what you might call the quantum substrate of reality itself. Matter and energy are just different expressions of more fundamental forces. Once you understand those forces, conventional physics becomes more like suggestions than restrictions. The casual way she described technology that bordered on omnipotence sent chills through every being in the chamber. If humans could manipulate the basic structure of reality, then they possessed capabilities that made them essentially gods compared to other galactic species. Will Drakmori scientists have access to this knowledge? Velkoth asked hopefully. Eventually, yes. But knowledge like this requires careful preparation. We'll start with basic principles and gradually introduce more advanced concepts as your people develop the theoretical framework to understand them. Chancellor Vixtel's 8 legs clicked nervously against the floor. Captain, what happens to our current government structure, to our political institutions? That's up to the Drakmori people to decide, Chen replied. We're not interested in micromanaging internal politics. What we care about is ensuring that your external policies don't threaten other species. So we maintain sovereignty over internal affairs. Within limits, policies that harm your own people or create instability that affects other species would be subject to review. But decisions about social organization, cultural practices, and economic systems would remain under Drakmori control. The arrangement sounded more reasonable than anyone in the chamber had expected. Instead of complete subjugation, humans were offering something closer to guided autonomy. "How long do we have to implement these changes?" asked economic advisor Zellman. "The immediate changes need to happen within the next 30 days, Chen replied. "Cessation of military expansion, release of enslaved populations, and restructuring of your military forces. The broader transformation will take years to complete." 30 days, whispered General Krextos, "to dismantle 8 centuries of expansion." "To begin dismantling it," Chen corrected. "The process will take time, but it needs to start immediately. Every day of delay means more suffering for the species currently under Drakmori control." Emperor Thaxmer realized that the conversation had moved beyond whether to accept human terms to how those terms would be implemented. The decision had been made, and now they needed to focus on execution. "Captain Chen," he said formally, "the Drakmori Empire officially agrees to your terms and requests assistance with the transition process." "Excellent, Your Magnificence. I'll be transmitting detailed implementation guidelines to your staff within the hour. We'll also be sending technical advisors to help coordinate the release of enslaved populations." Technical advisors? Human specialists who understand the logistics of large-scale social transformation. They'll work with your people to ensure the process goes smoothly. The idea of human advisors working within the Drakmori government was both reassuring and unsettling. It would provide access to expertise the Empire desperately needed, but it also represented a fundamental change in how decisions were made. "Will these advisors have any governmental authority?" asked Chancellor Vixtel. "They'll have advisory authority only," Chen replied. "Implementation decisions will remain with Drakmori leadership, but our people will provide recommendations based on experience with similar transitions." Admiral Nexvira leaned forward, her tactical mind focused on practical concerns. "Captain, what about species that were particularly brutalized under Drakmori rule? Some of them might seek revenge rather than cooperation." "That's a valid concern, Admiral. We'll be working with those species as well, helping them understand that revenge cycles are counterproductive. The goal is justice and healing, not retribution. And if they refuse to listen, then we'll protect the Drakmori people from unjustified attacks while working to address legitimate grievances through other means." The promise of protection was unexpected and deeply appreciated. These humans weren't just demanding change. They were offering to help manage the consequences of that change. Science Minister Velkoth raised another question. "Captain, will human advisors be sharing technological knowledge during the transition period?" "Selected technologies that will help with the transformation process, yes. Medical technology to help heal the victims of conquest. Communication systems to facilitate coordination across multiple worlds. Transportation technology to help with population relocations." The mention of advanced technology sparked interest throughout the chamber. Access to human science, even in limited forms, could revolutionize Drakmori capabilities. "What about military technology?" asked General Krextos. "Defensive systems only, and only after the transition is well underway. We want to ensure that improved capabilities are used to protect people, not to resume conquest." The condition was reasonable given the circumstances. Trust would have to be earned through demonstrated commitment to the new arrangement. Emperor Thaxmer looked around the chamber at his advisors, seeing a mixture of apprehension and curiosity in their alien features. The decision had been made, but the real work was just beginning. "Captain Chen," he said finally, "when do we begin?" "Immediately, Your Magnificence. The galaxy has been waiting 800 years for this day. Let's not keep it waiting any longer." The communication link closed, leaving the Drakmori leadership alone with the magnitude of what they had just committed to. In the space of a few days, They had gone from being the galaxy's dominant power to junior partners in a cooperative civilization. But as Emperor Thaxmer looked at his advisors, he realized that for the first time in centuries, they had something to look forward to beyond endless conquest and expansion. They had the possibility of becoming something greater than what they had been. The question now was whether they could rise to meet that possibility. 6 months after first contact with humanity, Emperor Thaxmer stood in what had once been his war room, now transformed into a coordination center for the largest social reconstruction project in galactic history. The holographic displays that had once shown conquest targets now tracked liberation efforts, refugee relocations, and infrastructure development across hundreds of worlds. The transformation had been more comprehensive than anyone had imagined possible. The human advisors had arrived within days of the agreement, bringing with them technologies and organizational methods that revolutionized how the Drakmori approached complex problems. But more importantly, they had brought perspectives that challenged every assumption the Empire had made about strength, efficiency, and progress. "Status report," Thaxmer requested as he entered the center. Former General Krextos looked up from a display showing troop deployments across the Outer Rim. His title had changed to Director of Peaceful Transition, but his tactical brilliance remained as sharp as ever. "Operation Liberation is proceeding ahead of schedule, Your Magnificence. We've successfully freed 63 enslaved species in the past month alone." The language itself had evolved during the transition. Words like conquest and subjugation had been replaced with cooperation and liberation. Initially, the changes had felt forced and artificial. Now they seemed natural, reflecting genuine shifts in how the Drakmori thought about their relationships with other species. "Any resistance from former subjects?" Thaxmer asked. "Less than expected," replied former Admiral Nexvara, now serving as Director of Interspecies Relations. "Most species are choosing to maintain economic relationships with us under the new partnership framework. They're getting fair compensation for their resources and genuine representation in decision-making processes." Dr. Sarah Chen, the human advisor assigned to coordinate the transition, looked up from her own displays. She had been working alongside Drakmori leadership for months, and her presence had become as natural as any other council member. "The key has been demonstrating that cooperation produces better results than coercion. When people see tangible benefits from working together, they're much more willing to participate." The success of the transition had surprised everyone, including the humans. Species that had been bitter enemies under the old system were now collaborating on joint projects. Worlds that had been strip-mined for resources were being restored using advanced human environmental technologies. Former slaves were becoming partners in enterprises that benefited everyone involved. Science Minister Velkoth approached the group, his excitement obvious despite his alien features. "Your Magnificence, the human science advisors have approved our request for quantum field manipulation training. 3 of our top researchers will begin advanced studies next month." The gradual introduction of human technology had been carefully managed to prevent cultural shock and ensure proper understanding. But each new capability that became available opened possibilities that the Drakmori had never imagined. "Any word from the other galactic powers?" Thaxmer asked. "The Zephyrian Crystal Collective has requested a meeting," reported Chancellor Vixtel, whose 8 legs now clicked with anticipation rather than anxiety. "They want to discuss joining the cooperative framework." "And the Vexi Hive?" "Still evaluating their options," Dr. Chen replied diplomatically. "But our intelligence suggests they're reconsidering their expansion policies. The success of our transition has gotten their attention." The ripple effects of the Drakmori transformation were being felt throughout the galaxy. Other species were watching the results with growing interest, and several had already requested information about joining the cooperative framework that humans were establishing. Emperor Thaxmer moved to the central display, which showed a real-time map of galactic political boundaries. The image was dramatically different from what it had been 6 months earlier. Instead of the rigid territorial divisions of competing empires, the map now showed a complex network of cooperative relationships, trade partnerships, and mutual defense agreements. "How many species are now participating in the galactic community?" he asked. 137 at full membership level," Dr. Chen replied. Another 46 at observer status, and 23 more have submitted applications for evaluation. The numbers were staggering. In 6 months, humanity had achieved what the Drakmori Empire had never managed in 8 centuries: genuine cooperation among hundreds of different species. And they're all doing this voluntarily? Thaxmer asked, though he already knew the answer. Completely, Chen confirmed. The benefits of cooperation are becoming self-evident. Access to shared technologies, expanded trade networks, collaborative research projects, and mutual defense agreements. Most species are discovering that they can achieve more through partnership than they ever could through conquest. Former General Krextos looked up from his displays with something that might have been satisfaction. Your Magnificence, the Drakmori military restructuring is complete. All combat units have been successfully transitioned to defense and exploration roles. Morale is actually higher than it was during the expansion period. The transformation of the Drakmori military had been one of the most challenging aspects of the transition. Warriors who had built their identities around conquest had needed to find new purposes in a cooperative galaxy. But the exploration and defense missions had proven even more engaging than military expansion. What about our exploration fleets? Thaxmer asked. They've made first contact with 3 previously unknown species in the past month, replied Director of Exploration Zixmal, formerly a combat commander in the Outer Fleets. All 3 encounters resulted in successful diplomatic relationships. The exploration protocols the humans provided have been incredibly effective. The discovery that there were still unknown species in the galaxy had been exciting for everyone involved. But even more exciting was the realization that first contact could be managed peacefully, opening possibilities for friendship rather than conquest. Dr. Chen manipulated her display to show exploration data. We're also detecting signs of intelligent life in previously unexplored regions of the galaxy. The cooperative approach to exploration is yielding far more discoveries than military surveys ever did. Science Minister Velkoth approached with barely contained enthusiasm. Your Magnificence, the collaborative research projects are producing extraordinary results. The combination of Drakmori strategic thinking, human theoretical knowledge, and contributions from other species is advancing our understanding of the universe at an unprecedented rate. Any specific breakthroughs? Thaxmer asked. We've successfully developed a new form of faster-than-light communication that doesn't rely on quantum entanglement, Velkoth reported. The theoretical framework came from human advisors, but the practical engineering solutions came from Drakmori innovation. Together, we've created something neither species could have achieved alone. The collaborative approach to science and technology had proven to be one of the most beneficial aspects of the new arrangement. Different species brought different strengths to research projects, and the combination of perspectives was yielding insights that none of them could have achieved independently. What about our own people? Thaxmer asked. How are they adapting to the changes? Chancellor Vixtel consulted his social monitoring systems. Better than expected, Your Magnificence. The initial resistance has largely disappeared as people see the benefits of the new system. Economic prosperity is higher than during the expansion period, social stability has improved, and there's a genuine sense of purpose that many say was missing before. Any lingering problems? Some older military officers are still struggling with the philosophical changes, admitted Director Krextos. But even they acknowledge that the results speak for themselves. We're achieving more than we ever did through conquest. Dr. Chen looked around the room at the assembled Drakmori leadership, her expression thoughtful. I have to admit, the transition has exceeded our most optimistic projections. We expected more resistance and more complications. What made the difference? Thaxmer asked. Leadership, Chen replied simply. Your decision to fully commit to the transformation set the tone for everything that followed. When people see their leaders genuinely embracing change, it makes their own adaptation much easier. The Emperor considered her words while studying the displays around him. The transformation had indeed been remarkable, but it had also required abandoning everything he had believed about power and strength. Dr. Chen, he said finally, when your ship first appeared 6 months ago, I thought you were going to destroy everything we had built. Now I realize you were offering us something far better. Your Magnificence, we never wanted to destroy the Drakmori Empire. We wanted to help it evolve into something greater. The strength and capabilities that made you successful conquerors are the same qualities that make you excellent partners and explorers. And the other species, the ones we enslaved and brutalized for centuries. Healing takes time, Chen admitted. But forgiveness is possible when it's accompanied by genuine change and concrete benefits. Most species are more interested in building a better future than dwelling on past grievances. Former Admiral Nexvara looked up from her diplomatic monitoring systems. Your Magnificence, the Rigelian Assembly has submitted a formal proposal for a joint military exercise. They want to test cooperative defense strategies against simulated external threats. The idea that former enemies would voluntarily train together for mutual defense would have been incomprehensible 6 months earlier. Now it seemed like the natural next step in galactic evolution. Approve it, Thaxmer ordered, and invite other species to participate as observers. Already done, Your Magnificence, Nexvara replied with what passed for a smile among her species. The Emperor moved to the window overlooking the capital city. The view had changed dramatically since the transformation began. Where once there had been monuments to conquest and military victory, there were now parks, cultural centers, and research facilities. The city hummed with activity, but it was the activity of construction rather than preparation for war. Dr. Chen, he said without turning around, what happens next? Where do we go from here? Wherever we choose to go, Your Magnificence. That's the beauty of cooperation. Instead of being limited by what any single species can achieve, we're limited only by our collective imagination. And the external threats you mentioned when we first met. Chen's expression grew more serious. Still out there and still dangerous, but we're better prepared to face them now than we would have been 6 months ago. A galaxy united in common cause is far stronger than one divided by conquest and competition. Science Minister Velkoth approached with a new display showing deep space monitoring data. Your Magnificence, our extended sensor networks are detecting unusual activity in the galactic periphery. Whatever's out there appears to be much larger than anything we've encountered before. The data was sobering, showing energy signatures that dwarfed anything the Cooperative Alliance had available. But for the first time since the transformation began, the prospect of external threats didn't feel overwhelming. How long until we have more detailed information? Thaxmer asked. The joint exploration mission should reach the area within 3 months, Velkoth replied. It's the largest cooperative venture we've attempted so far, 12 species contributing ships and personnel. 12 species working together on a single mission, the Emperor mused. 6 months ago, that would have been impossible. Your Magnificence, Dr. Chen said quietly. That's just the beginning. Wait until you see what we can accomplish when all 200 species in the galaxy are working toward common goals. Emperor Thaxmer turned back to face the room, looking at the assembled Drakmori leadership and their human advisor. 6 months ago, he had been the ruler of a powerful but ultimately limited empire. Now he was a partner in something far grander, a galactic civilization built on cooperation, mutual respect, and shared purpose. Dr. Chen, he said with genuine curiosity, how long do humans think this cooperative framework will last? That depends on us, Your Magnificence, on all of us. But if we're wise enough to keep learning from each other and strong enough to face external challenges together, there's no reason it can't last forever. The Emperor looked around the room one more time, seeing the future of his species reflected in the faces of beings who had once been enemies and were now friends. The Drakmori Empire was dead, but something far better had taken its place. For the first time in 8 centuries, the galaxy was truly united, and whatever challenges lay ahead in the vast darkness between the stars, they would face them together. The age of conquest was over. The age of cooperation had begun.